What if the trajectory of your life, your health, your destiny, even the architecture of your mind had already been shaped long before you took your first breath? Not by divine will, nor by personal merit, but by a centuries-old obsession to preserve bloodlines, to maintain the illusion of purity within the upper class. For generations, royal families across the globe engaged in a silent and devastating bargain. In their pursuit of dynastic stability and political legitimacy, they sacrificed something far more valuable: the integrity of their own genetic future. Cousins married cousins. Nephews wed their aunts. And with each generation, the cost of this genetic insularity became more apparent. Minds began to fracture, bodies weakened, and royal family trees, once symbols of divine order, began to resemble tangled webs of pathology. Today, we're diving into the sad, shocking, and sometimes disturbing stories of the most inbred women in history. And trust me, by the time we get to number 1, you won't believe what you hear. We begin with Isabella II of Spain, who ruled Spain from 1833 to 1868. But her life wasn't filled with royal glory. It was shaped by the damaging effects of too much family mixing. Born in 1830 into the intricate and often disturbing web of Habsburg bloodlines, Isabella was greeted not with the tender joy reserved for new life, but with the weight of dynastic expectations. Her father, Ferdinand VII, had long yearned for a male heir to continue the patriarchal lineage. Instead, he received a fragile daughter, celebrated more out of political necessity than genuine delight. But from the very beginning, Isabella's life bore the biological scars of the system that produced her. She was the child of an uncle-niece union, a genetic gamble masquerading as tradition. Medical anomalies emerged early. Both Isabella and her sister exhibited unexplained symptoms that puzzled physicians. The family tree, when traced, resembled a closed loop. One side of her grandparents were also her great-grandparents on the other. At just 16, Isabella was compelled to marry her double second cousin. The union produced 11 children, though only 5 survived infancy, a grim reflection of both the era's medical limitations and the hereditary fragility engineered by inbreeding. Whispers filled the royal court. Few believed her husband was the biological father of any of the children. Their marriage was less a union than a performance, one that concealed a private life riddled with secrecy, infidelity, and alienation. Ultimately, Isabella was deposed, exiled from a throne that had offered little but personal suffering. But her story still shows how her family's obsession with bloodlines caused serious damage. Marie-Louise of Austria. The next victim of royal inbreeding was Marie-Louise of Austria. Born into the Habsburg dynasty, arguably the most interwoven royal family in European history, Marie-Louise was not merely the daughter of an emperor. She was the product of a genetic experiment that had been unfolding for centuries. Her parents were double first cousins. They shared all 4 grandparents. In modern genetic science, such a union is rare and typically observed only in extremely isolated populations. But in royal courts, it was strategic. The Habsburgs believed that bloodline was destiny, and thus maintaining its purity became more important than the health of the bodies that carried it. The result was predictable. Of the 12 children born to her parents, 5 died young, and Marie-Louise herself, a child of twisted genetics, had only 4 distinct great-grandparents. Half the number found in a typical family tree. Her lineage didn't branch, it circled in on itself. At the age of 18, Marie-Louise was married off to Napoleon Bonaparte, her father's former enemy, the man whose wars had ravaged her homeland. But in the cold calculus of empire, peace mattered more than resentment, and heirs mattered more than happiness. The union was less about love and more about legacy. It was meant to secure an alliance and produce a male heir who could bind France and Austria in blood. Lorraine Whittaker. Now we move from royal castles to a small town in America. Lorraine Whittaker's story shows that inbreeding isn't just a thing of the past. It still happens today. Her family was featured in a well-known documentary, showing what happens when families intermarry for generations without outside contact. Lorraine is considered one of the most inbred people in recent history. She's also the mother of Timmy Whitaker, possibly the most genetically affected living person. Their story is deeply unsettling, not to shock, but to remind us that history repeats itself in forgotten corners of the world. Maria I of Portugal. Her parents were the 16th royal couple from Spain and Portugal to marry closely. She continued the tradition by marrying her own uncle. Half of her children died, likely due to genetic problems. As she got older, Maria's mental health declined badly, and she was declared unfit to rule. Her story shows how royal power wasn't lost through war, but through the slow, hidden damage of inbreeding. Marie-Louise Elizabeth d'Orléans. Her life sounds like a sad novel. Born to a broken royal family, her father was forced to marry his cousin, who was the illegitimate daughter of King Louis XIV. As the oldest child, Marie-Louise had no real choice in her life. She married another cousin, Prince Charles of Berry. She had 3 kids, but none survived. Whether it was due to inbreeding or bad luck, we don't know. But what we do know is she began drinking heavily at just 14. Was it her way of crying out for help, or just trying to survive her fate? Either way, her life was a painful example of how royal duties could destroy a person. Princess Alexia of Greece. Born in 1965, she shows how inbreeding didn't disappear in modern times. She and her 4 siblings were born from one of the last big royal matches between a king and a princess. But the marriage wasn't just romantic, it was very close genetically. Her parents were second cousins and third cousins. On top of that, her father's grandparents were siblings, and his grandmother was also the sister of his great-grandfather. Her mother's family tree was also full of close ties. Even though her parents seemed happy, the genes they passed down still made their children like Alexia partially inbred, a modern royal tale rooted in ancient habits. The next one is Maria Antonia of Austria. Her name isn't well known, but her family's genetic story is shocking. Part of the Habsburg dynasty, her family tree was so tangled that historians say it looked more like a circle than a tree. In fact, her genetic makeup was as extreme as someone born from a brother and sister. Her story is often forgotten, but from a scientific view, she stands at the peak of royal inbreeding. Next, Ankhesenamun and Tutankhamun. We go way back for this one to ancient Egypt. These tiny mummified baby girls were the daughters of Pharaoh Tutankhamun and his wife Ankhesenamun. They were likely stillborn, and their story tells us a lot. Why? Because Ankhesenamun was not just Tutankhamun's queen, she was his half-sister. They shared the same father, and their marriage followed Egypt's tradition of keeping power in the family. But it came at a cost. Their daughters were born with serious birth defects. Their short lives are a painful reminder that even kings couldn't escape the danger of marrying too close. Finally, Cleopatra II, Philopator. Forget the Hollywood version. This Cleopatra wasn't the glamorous queen you've seen in movies. She was the result of one of the most extreme inbreeding strategies ever. Though she ruled Egypt, her bloodline was purely Greek. Her family, the Ptolemies, repeatedly married brothers to sisters and uncles to nieces, all to keep power in the family. Her parents were siblings, her grandparents were siblings, and her own siblings married each other too. She even ruled alone later, carrying the full weight of this family tradition. Even her name came from a rare Syrian princess, a hint that outsiders were almost never allowed in. Cleopatra II wasn't just a queen. She was the living result of a family's obsession with keeping their blood pure. From golden thrones to hidden towns, from royal families to isolated groups, the desire for control, legacy, and power has left behind a trail of pain. These women's stories show us that history isn't only shaped by war or politics, but also by the unseen effects of genetics and blood.